It's time to talk about our third Stephen King movie from 1983. That would be the movie Christine, directed by John Carpenter. Have you ever felt like your car was trying to kill you? Well, that is the premise of the movie Christine. This movie stars Keith Gordon as Arnie. He is your typical nerdy guy, not popular, kind of picked on, doesn't do well with the ladies, and he wants his own car. And he comes across a 1958 Plymouth Fury that is in less than pristine condition, and he takes the time to fix it up. And he becomes obsessed with this car, where it does give him the popularity he wants, the girl he wants, but it also comes at a price. And Keith Gordon will be a familiar face to movies, especially in the early 80s. Right now, he is primarily a director. He decided to take that turn in his career, I think, sometime in the 90s. But especially in the early 80s, he was known for things like Jaws 2 and the Rodney Dangerfield movie Back to School, and the cult classic The Legend of Billie Jean. He definitely has one of those faces where he will look familiar to you. Arnie has a best friend named Dennis, played by John Stockwell. John Stockwell is the more popular kid, but they've been friends since they were kids, and they've stayed that way. Dennis always sticking up for Arnie. And John Stockwell, I think, is probably best known as Cougar in Top Gun, but an endlessly recognizable face from especially the early to mid 80s in the acting field. Then there is the girl, Alexandra Paul, who plays Lee, the girl of Arnie's dreams, and this car enables him to get her. But will this car let him keep her? The car gets jealous, as cars do. Alexandra Paul, probably she is the lead female character in the 1987 movie Dragnet, but probably best known as lifeguard Stephanie Holden in Baywatch, the not as sexy lifeguard. And to round out the cast of Christine, we also have a young Kelly Preston playing one of the classmates of Roseanne. We have, of course, the adult cast in the movie, Robert Prosky playing Darnell, Harry Dean Stanton playing Junkins, and Christine Belford playing Regina Cunningham, who is Arnie's mother. As you might know, John Carpenter was originally asked to direct the movie Cujo, and Carpenter himself was much more interested in being the director of this movie, Christine. John Carpenter's first big splash was the movie Halloween. He was riding a high, and he made the movies The Fog, which was a big hit in the early 80s, but he had a little misstep, which is hard to believe now, thinking about the movie The Thing. But The Thing was his first big budget studio film, and it was not a hit. I did see The Thing when it came out, and I loved The Thing. In my family, The Thing was always as well known and critically acclaimed as it is now. No, nowadays people are like, The Thing is great. And yes, it was. But it wasn't seen as that in the early 80s when it first came out. But it is another one of those movies where sometimes in 20 years, people realize a movie was actually great and ahead of its time. Oh, and how could I forget? So he had The Fog, which was a big hit after Halloween. He had Escape from New York, which is a huge hit after Halloween. And then he had The Thing, which came out in 1982, which wasn't a huge hit and was his first big studio movie. And it really, that experience made him never want to do a studio film again. So the movie Christine was produced by Richard Kobritz, which, if you remember, he also produced the 1979 miniseries Salem's Lot. And he became familiar with Stephen King this way. They kind of became like friends, acquaintances. And Stephen King sent him 2 of his manuscripts before they were published. One was Cujo and one was Christine. And he ends up purchasing the movie rights to Christine. He saw it as a celebration with Americans' fixation of the automobile. And his first choice of director was John Carpenter. So he does let John Carpenter read the manuscript of the Stephen King novel, and that's how Carpenter became more interested in the movie Christine instead of the movie Cujo. And Kobritz and Carpenter had previously worked together on the 1978 television movie Someone's Watching Me. But alas, Carpenter wasn't like gung-ho about making Christine, although that was his preference if he had a choice of Stephen King works. He also looked at doing Firestarter at this time, but he sort of saw this as more directing for hire than on one of his own projects. Again, this goes back to the box office failure of the movie The Thing. And where his previous films were mostly of his own work, he wrote the scripts, some of them original stories of his. And when he read Christine, he was interested in it, but he didn't find it frightening. And I will come out and say it is not really a very frightening movie or book. But in retrospect, after the failure of The Thing, he felt it was the right thing for him to do at that time in his career. He felt like he would never get to direct one of his original projects again if he didn't do this movie, because movies even back then cost a lot of money to make. And the budget of Christine was about $9.7 million. So this was his chance to get a reasonable budget and see if he could do a hit film again. And it does go on to make a little over $21 million at the box office. So it was a modest hit, a moderate hit. 1983 also saw a waning of returns on the Stephen King horror movie. So he's also fighting with this. And this is the last one in the 3 Stephen King movies that came out in the year 1983. First with Cujo, second with The Dead Zone, and then in December of 1983, you have Christine come out. And the novel Christine actually did come out in 1983. Filming of Christine just started in April of 1983. It was a mere week after the book came out itself. And it was shot in and around the Los Angeles area, the Southern California area, not in Los Angeles proper, but the sprawling expanse that is considered the LA area. So on interesting casting that might have taken place on the movie Christine. At one point, Scott Baio was considered to play the role of Arnie, and Brooke Shields was set to play the character of Lee. But the filmmakers ended up agreeing that this movie would be much better if it was full of a cast of unknowns, which leads to Kevin Bacon, had been in some things but largely unknown, offered the lead role in the movie, but he turns it down so he can make the movie Footloose, which came out in 1984. Nicolas Cage also auditioned for a role in this movie and did not get it. I don't think he did any of the main characters. I believe what he auditioned for is the character of Buddy in the movie. John Cusack, who at the time was a teenager, an appropriate age for the storyline, also auditioned for the role of Arnie in this movie. And at that time, yes, he wouldn't have been known. So what did Stephen King think of the adaptation of this movie? Well, Stephen King has gone on record that there are two movies of his works that were made that bore him. One being The Shining, and the other being Christine. And he does go on to note that there's a wide range of reactions to his movies. Some are downright bad, some are good, but he was disappointing in The Shining and Christine because they're boring, and he'd rather movies made of his books be bad instead of boring, which I agree. The kiss of death for a movie is that it is boring. Outrage me, move me, make something that just makes me angry, make something that makes me happy, but don't give me a boring movie. Which, in my opinion, Christine doesn't qualify in the boring category. And at the time that it came out, critically, it was mixed. It was an either love or hate movie. And the average rating of the movie is kind of middling. So that kind of supports Stephen King's idea that this movie is boring. But you have a wide range of reactions to this movie. And I think the reaction to this movie has gotten a little bit better over the years. Not that it had a bad reaction in the first place. John Carpenter's direction and everything that is praised, they did think if they had criticism of the movie that it comes off a little silly. And yes, I agree with that. When I first saw this movie when I was a kid, I would agree with the silly assessment. Upon watching this as time went on, you really get the deeper meanings of the movie Christine and how well this is directed. Yes, in parts it is still silly, how the car comes back to life, how people react to it, how people just shouldn't have never been in the positions they were, how when the car is chasing them, why don't they just, there's tons of things that people could have done in this movie to react different to this killer car. And yes, this is a killer car story, and that lends to the silliness. But if you just let the silliness take over while watching this movie, it is very enjoyable. And part of what makes Christine enjoyable is actually the soundtrack to the movie. It is filled with songs of the era that Christine was made, plus some new songs thrown in there. But we have George Thorogood's Bad to the Bone, Buddy Holly Not Fade Away, We Belong Together, Keep a Knockin', and Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay, among others. So just if you are a fan of late 50s music, this is actually the soundtrack to Christine is a very good soundtrack to have because it's just one hit after another of that late 50s music. So all in all, I think Christine is worth a watch. You might actually love it. It's a fun watch. It's a not serious watch. So if you just, put away your, this is silly cap, and just let the movie take hold and see some of the deeper meanings in this. And the acting in this movie is actually really good. Considering what they're dealing with in this movie is kind of absurd. The actors in this movie do a really good job of towing that line between the absurd storyline and what is happening and making believable performances that help you draw more into the film. And of course, as I've said before, if you are a Stephen King fan, this is one that you must watch. And if you're a John Carpenter fan, this is a movie you must watch of his. But my name is Stacia, and I'm just a person on the internet that likes to talk about movies. And if you like to talk about movies as much as I do, I welcome you to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up. It really tells YouTube that you like this video, and it helps push it out to more people. And give me a comment. I love engaging with people in the comments and talking more about movies and what you feel of these films that I'm talking about. But my name is Stacia. I love you all. Bye.